When it comes to true crime reporting, I often only talk about cases that have come to a conclusion, or at the very least are not actively developing. I've chosen to do this for a multitude of reasons, but most importantly among them is the fact that a lot of the information that comes out in the initial stages of a case often aren't fact-checked and they're misleading. Especially in the age of social media where one Twitter account can claim to have evidence provided by a suspect that proves their involvement, only to have faked the evidence for online likes and attention. This is why, for example, we still haven't covered the Gabby Petito case, or the Idaho 4 case, and countless others that have gone viral in the past couple of years. In fact, if you were to look through the actual crime reporting of any of these cases that are actually done well by respected journalists, you'll probably find examples of them regurgitating false information because they're unable to properly fact-check it, given that we're obviously a very small team who cannot immediately issue a retraction or make new videos clarifying said false information. With that said, the sheer amount of emails, comments, and demands we've received over the past week for us to cover this case specifically has been massive, and so we feel obliged to respond. All of the information we've spoken about today has been fact-checked to the best of our ability. This means that the majority of information provided has come from multiple accredited sources unless specifically stated otherwise. If you find that there's information that was left out, it was either because it was not backed up by multiple sources or has been debunked, or it is so new that we're not able to validate it independently. So, with that said, today we'll be going over the ongoing investigation into what happened to Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and a psychological breakdown into the artist David, as he seemed enthralled by the idea of having a toxic, homicidal relationship in his art. Links to all sources used will be left in the description box down below, and any updates will be left in a pinned comment down below as well. Should information in this video be out of date, corrected, or false, we will leave a correction. At time of recording, David Anthony Burke has not technically been charged with any crime, and so is entirely innocent. Everything said in this video is our own belief. And again, all of the evidence provided can be found in the description box down below. So, let us begin. Before we go over any of the details of this case, we want to provide some understanding of Celeste Rivas Hernandez and the person she was before the murder. Though this crime has become somewhat of a public spectacle, with David's music being streamed more than ever, her life was ultimately taken, and her memory deserves to be respected. However, at the time of writing, very little is known about Celeste. Those who have described her to the media have only had small interactions with her. She was described by friends and family as being a shy, soft-spoken girl who was bubbly and sweet. Her home life was said to be fraught, as according to a person claiming to be her cousin, she had run away from home 4 times prior to when she went missing, and sometimes had lived with her extended family. A small update has come out right before we posted this video, but according to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, deputies were called to her residence at least 11 times in just 1 year, and reportedly came 3 times in 1 day. Calls were listed as minor crime investigations. However, specific details about these calls have not been publicized. Her ex-boyfriend has also come forward and did an interview with TMZ, which we can of course not include in this video, as they continue to block our video from going live. However, in the interview, the boyfriend states that Celeste often joked about running away from home. This is to confirm that we know the home life was fraught. However, the details are still murky. Young teens running away from home is not uncommon, even from more stable households. I think one reason for this is because they start to realize how little control they have over their almost adult lives. During puberty, the brain is flooded with hormones like dopamine, cortisol, testosterone, and estrogen. These magnify emotions to an almost cinematic scale. Every time your parents tell you no, it feels like the end of the world, and like they couldn't possibly understand you. Your prefrontal cortex is still under construction, meaning that there's an inability to fully grasp the immensity of some decisions and conceptualize long-term consequences. That's why so many young teens run away from home. It isn't usually a calculated plan, but rather an impulsive response to feelings of discontentment or conflict. They're ultimately experimenting with autonomy at the very moment their biology makes them the most vulnerable to extreme emotions. And this is precisely why predators enter the story. Sexual predators are opportunists who understand teen psychology frighteningly well. They understand that a teenager frustrated with their parents or bored with their hometown is not experiencing something abnormal. Predators will hijack those feelings and redirect them. They'll validate a teen's frustrations, saying things like, "Your parents don't understand you, but I do. I'm the real deal. And wow, I can't believe your mom doesn't understand how cool and mature you are the way that I do." They make the minor feel understood, over-validating their reaction in order to gain their trust and endear themselves to them. Eventually, the idea of running away from home will come up. usually as an aside from the minor, who has been thoroughly groomed, and so the predator will jump on it. They'll frame running away from home as a romantic, Shakespearean gesture, an escape to freedom and love. The predator will then promise to help them, to hide them if the cops come after them, and will promise to be a better alternative to their wretched family. We've seen this happen countless times, even with minors who come from a happy, normal home. But predators tend to target children who are either being abused or neglected to some degree. A child from a stable, well-supported home usually has layers of watchful eyes, consistent boundaries, and strong self-esteem built from reinforcement. Targeting them means it's more likely for a predator's crimes to land them in jail. But when a child grows up in a single-parent home or in poverty, the cracks can become wider. And this isn't because those children are any less resilient or capable, but because the conditions of their environment make them more of a viable option to someone searching for vulnerability. Single parents often juggle multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. That doesn't mean they don't love their children deeply, but it does mean that supervision isn't always airtight. When they are present, they're often tired and unable to fully be present. This can lead to the minor feeling as if they don't matter, and so their self-esteem may be eroding. A child who spends more time alone or online without much oversight becomes easier for a predator to access. Add in financial stress, and the household atmosphere may feel tense or chaotic. Children in those settings may long for stability, comfort, or attention, and predators are skilled at packaging themselves as the answer to those unspoken needs. Predators also prey on unmet emotional needs. A child who doesn't feel consistently affirmed or heard at home may be drawn to anyone who offers a sense of belonging. That's the predator's script. You're special. You're mature. You're different from everyone else. For a kid navigating a rough life at home, that can feel extremely validating. So when you put it all together, the reason children from single-parent or disadvantaged homes are targeted is not because of some flaw in those children. It's because predators calculate risk. They look for children who are less likely to have adults hovering over their shoulder, or less likely to confide in a parent who has time to intervene. And so, they're less likely to have the financial or emotional resources to push back. It's cold, it's deliberate, and it works only because the very circumstances of hardship create the gaps predators slither into. That is all to say that while we don't know the kind of home Celeste was brought up in, we do know that she felt isolated enough to run away multiple times, and that she was likely lured by the man she idolized online, David. David Anthony Burke was born March 28, 2005, in Queens, New York, before his family eventually relocated to Houston, Texas. David was particularly drawn into the Fortnite community, first trying to become a gaming YouTuber and Twitch streamer in his early teens. The earliest video we were able to source was when he would have been about 13 years old, when his mother was homeschooling him. However, due to how oversaturated the online gaming community is, his videos would fail to garner any audience on their own. He then shifted his strategy and began to upload his clips, along with other streamers' clips, with popular music. David would gravitate to independent artists whose music was trending on TikTok or other social media, and would gain an even bigger audience. However, he ran into one small issue. Because he was using other people's music, his videos would get copyright claimed. This meant that all of the money made on them would go to the copyright owner, whether that be the musician or the label that they were on. Burke would state on his YouTube channel that he found this to be frustrating and an abuse of the copyright system on YouTube, which it objectively was not. David would then vent his frustrations to his mother, who pushed him to make his own music for the videos. David had grown up around gospel music, but in his time online, had become a fan of rap, hip-hop, indie, and alt-rock. He would state that he gravitated towards darker, more macabre aesthetics, finding a, quote, identity in them, unquote. He claimed that there was a sort of inherent darkness to him that could only come out when he was writing, saying he specifically related heavily to Kira from the anime Death Note. Great. He began releasing his music on SoundCloud in 2021, at the age of 16. His songs often revolved around him being tortured psychologically and being a bad boyfriend or partner. His writing was purposely vague, but he leaned heavily into a sort of tortured artist motif, repeating that he was a bad guy trying to be good, and how even though he was ultimately hurting the other person, they shouldn't leave him because that would be cruel. In our research, we've read through the majority of his lyrics, and almost all of them tell the same story. I'm a bad person, I'm hurting you, but don't leave me though, because that would hurt me more than anything, rinse and repeat. He also seemed to write about running away a lot, whether that be his love interest running away from the past, or them running away together, or her running away from him. But the repetitive nature of his writing didn't gain any widespread notice until recently. His music began to gain attention, with his lyrics being applicable to young people on TikTok. In particular, his song Romantic Homicide went viral, with over 1.5 billion streams at the time of writing. This attention led to him signing with Interscope, one of the major music labels who had previously copyright claimed his videos. David ultimately had done what so many young people longed to do. He turned his creative efforts into a real career, garnered thousands of fans, and was being widely lauded for his work. With his fame and success came a certain amount of power which he immediately used to start predating on one of his fans. Before we go any further, we have to discuss just the facts of the case. Celeste would finally go missing on February 14, 2024. This is the first confirmed time she ran away from home, according to People.com, and it's widely believed that she did so to spend Valentine's Day with David. This image was taken and circulated during that time, which many believe show her with him, although her face is covered by a bag he reportedly bought for her. She returned home sometime after that. However, on March 18th, she reportedly ran away from home again, and again she would return home after a short while. She would then run away from home the final time on April 5th, 2024. On the missing child poster, it would state that she was wearing gray pants, a black sweater, and Hello Kitty sandals when she was last seen. Celeste was reportedly a big fan of Hello Kitty, something that David would go on to reference in multiple social media posts about her. According to TMZ, her mother would state that she was last seen with her boyfriend named David. However, the reporting does not make it clear whether that information was given to the police at the time, or whether that is something that they found out more recently. It's also been reported that Celeste's mother knew that she was dating someone named David, but allegedly believed him to be a 14-year-old boy, and not a famous musician who had spent a considerable amount of time grooming her minor daughter. Another quick update. According to the neighbor's Ring doorbell footage, Celeste had returned to the family home sometime in September. The footage, which was made public by TMZ, shows Celeste screaming at her neighbors over a prank.
Let me talk real quick, okay? You gonna let me talk? I ain't gonna let you talk. No, you ain't gonna let me talk. Why you not gonna let me talk? You tripping. I ain't tripping. Nah, you tripping. Saw the door and you tripping.
Oh my god.
Nah, cause you tripping. Move the out of here.
I ain't gonna do shit. I ain't gonna do shit. You better get over there. Get your over there, girl.
The fact that Celeste came home and that was never updated to the police or on her missing persons posters is vitally important, as it shows that the police and the public were working with outdated information, and that, to some degree, her parents were allowing her to come and go as she pleased. It also illustrates why the police probably didn't take her disappearance as seriously as others. Based solely on the facts of the case, Celeste was a troubled young girl who routinely ran away from home, but always seemed to come back, meaning that it was less likely that she'd been abducted or she was being held against her will. With that in mind, the police in the area would likely not take her case very seriously, because they would assume that she was just hanging out with friends and not in actual danger. This is not a defense of the police in this case, just a general overview of how they operate. Frankly speaking, since they had been called to the home at least 11 times in 1 year and had multiple reports of Celeste running away, a CPS investigation should have been opened. Something was clearly wrong in that home or in her personal life that needed to be examined. However, no one took the time to do so. Because Celeste's family didn't update the police that she had returned home, then later left again, they weren't working with accurate or up-to-date information. The circumstances around her going missing had changed, and that should have been made clear to law enforcement, so they could at least try and find her. In June of 2024, Celeste would be seen wearing a large black hoodie, pink sweatpants, and Hello Kitty Crocs backstage at one of David's concerts. She kept her hoodie up, obviously trying to cover her face as to not be recognized, but some fans were able to get her on video. This sighting flew under the radar, as her missing persons case did not gain any sort of widespread attention, and it would be nearly a year before this video would be seen as evidence. Almost a year later, on September 3, 2025, a Tesla was reported to the police as being abandoned in a Hollywood Hills neighborhood. The area is famously stringent about street parking, which meant that after 5 days, it was towed away. According to TMZ, the Tesla had been in the area since May and would move every few days to show that it had not been abandoned. Notably, the vehicle was registered to David Anthony Burke. It hadn't been reported stolen and was reportedly in the proximity to a residence that was rented by David's manager and used frequently by the singer. A few days later, the Tesla was impounded and taken to Hollywood Tow. However, once there, the staff reported a foul smell emanating from the vehicle and called law enforcement. Upon their arrival, they searched the vehicle and found Celeste's remains. She had been dismembered, placed in a plastic garbage bag, and left in the trunk of the vehicle. The length of their relationship is still currently unknown. However, according to Celeste's own accounts, she made a Discord account on January 4th, 2021, when she would have been 10 years old. This is the account that she would use to interact with David, more specifically in his fan Discord. In March of 2022, David would release the song, Decide. The lyrics read, quote, "I cannot wait until I undo all my mistakes. Maybe then we can just run away. Do you feel at home when you're by my side?" Unquote. And then, quote, "Save your tears, 7 years. I know life is complicated. You don't have to say no more. Don't know if I'm going to make it." At the time, Celeste would have been 11 years old, which makes David's reference to 7 years appear to be an allusion to him having to wait for her until she's 18, which he immediately undermines in the next lyric, where he says he doesn't know if he would be able to, quote, "make it," unquote. Because the song talks about running away repeatedly, as well as 7 years and him needing to wait for something to happen in the relationship for it to be okay, people believe this song is about Celeste. If that is true, we can actually see multiple grooming techniques used within the lyrics, particularly in the ending line, which is repeated throughout, where David sings, quote, "You're the one who started this," unquote. This is something that sexual predators will say frequently, both to their victims and if their crimes are eventually exposed. They'll put forward the notion that it was the child who came onto them, and then they were pursued romantically by the minor, and if it's anyone's fault, it's the child, which makes little logical sense. Children, especially those going through puberty, will misplace romantic feelings onto the adults in their lives. This is often because they want to be viewed as more mature. However, that of course doesn't justify an adult exploiting those misplaced feelings. Children cannot reasonably understand the impact of their own actions. They can't think through the consequences of their decisions, and will often express the desire to do things that will objectively cause them harm. So that doesn't make it okay for the adults around them to allow them to do those things. If the song is about Celeste, David is putting pressure onto the 11-year-old to take care of his mental health and general well-being, all because she was a fan of his and, quote, started this. However, what did her, quote, starting this, unquote, look like? Her liking his Fortnite gameplay? Her enjoying his music? I mean, come on. A child should be allowed to like a celebrity and interact with their work without that being misconstrued as a romantic pursuit. Predators will often reframe the child as being the aggressor in order to justify their own actions. While this rarely works on the adults they speak to, it does, however, work on their child victims. The adult will often emphasize how dangerous what they are doing is to the minor victim, repeating that if they are caught, the predator's life will be ruined. They will go to prison, they'll lose their job, and so on. They place the immensity of that stress onto the child's shoulders in order to keep them quiet and submissive to them. They will also place their mental health onto the child's shoulders, saying that if anyone were to find out about their crimes, or if the child were to break up with them, they would end their own life. It's a sick type of manipulation that we see in our To Catch a Predator videos, but David's lyrics appear to be more artistic, public versions of that. May 10th, 2022, David would tweet out, quote, "When I was writing this, I got a notie from you, as you were talking about wanting to be with your mom and sister again. Take me where I belong, but our circumstances won't allow us to be in our ideal situations. We gotta push through it, bro. Crossed finger emoji, black heart emoji." Some of the general public have also linked this to be about Celeste. This, of course, isn't direct evidence by any means. However, even if this tweet was about someone his own age, it still displays an obviously abusive relationship dynamic. If you're in a relationship with someone who's trying to keep you from your family, or someone who refuses to allow you to leave them, that is abuse. It doesn't matter if they're dealing with extreme feelings of abandonment, or they're an artist who mythologizes their own bad behavior. No person should keep you away from the people who love you. In May, he released yet another song. This song was centered around his romantic interest running away from her past, which he actively encourages her to do. Running away from someone's past is usually framed as a negative thing, one in which a friend or family member would not encourage. But if the running away is literal, and something that David wanted Celeste to do in order to stay together, the lyrics would make a fair bit of sense. Shortly thereafter, David would release another song, this time titled Never Again. In this song, David talks about being away from his partner, that they have been gone for too long, and that he needs to bring them back home with him. People have also theorized that he wrote this when Celeste had returned home to be with her family, and he was of course upset with her about that. On July 27th, 2022, David would then release Here With Me, one of his most streamed songs. The chorus is the part that went viral, with many people using it for romantic edits and videos via TikTok, Instagram, and other social media. As the lyrics read out, "I don't care how long it takes, as long as I'm with you, I've got a smile on my face." Again, we see the theme of waiting for something to happen in a romance. Of course, this could also be applicable to long-distance relationships, or when you're just going through a hard time. But alongside his previous song in which 7 years was referenced, this line now holds a darker meaning. 2022 would also be the first time David would seemingly release music on Celeste's birthday, September 7th. This disturbing tradition was started on her 12th birthday, with the song Romantic Homicide. The music video featured a girl that looks similar to Celeste, wearing a wedding dress. David, of course, wearing white surgical gauze over his eyes, kills the girl in the dress by stabbing her in the stomach. Seems like a pretty balanced guy. The song has a line where David sings he killed a person in the back of his mind, as if she was dead to him, and he ultimately is unaffected. There is no evidence at the time of recording that David knew Celeste at this time that has been independently verified. But the fact that the video was released on her birthday and the girl featured in the video looks so much like her feels like a bit more than a coincidence. The first piece of evidence of David interacting with Celeste is this screenshot taken from the aforementioned fan Discord server. David's account messaged the general chat, quote, "Celeste in here?" unquote, with Celeste's account immediately responding with, "Hi David, bark," unquote. Her message back to him is entirely in uppercase, showing her excitement to be interacting with someone she is obviously a fan of, and there is debate as to whether or not she meant to write Burke, as in his last name, or bark, like she were a dog. We've become aware that barking at someone online is considered flirting in some spheres. This lone public message shows a degree of familiarity between the two, and is absolutely not their first interaction. David would have been 17 at this time, and Celeste would have just turned 12 the month before. Because the date of the music video being released, the girl in the video looking so similarly to Celeste, as well as the date Celeste's Discord account was made, his lyrics talking about needing to wait 7 years and running away, and the familiarity within one public message between the two, many believe that the two had, at the very least, interacted since she was about 11 years old. November that year, he would release the music video for Here With Me, once again utilizing a female actress that resembled Celeste. Unlike Romantic Homicide, the video doesn't end with his character murdering her. Instead, she dies of old age, and an actor portraying his older self walks into the ocean, only to be reunited with her in the afterlife. Or at least, that's what we took away from the imagery. Either way, in each potential depiction of his relationship with Celeste, she dies and he outlives her. This is also the repeated motif of him having an alter ego of sorts, one whose eyes are always blindfolded by white gauze and covered in blood. He spoke to many publications about his character, and how it's essentially his dark passenger, so to speak. The character's name is Itami, spelled with a 4 instead of an A, like in his own name. Itami means pain in Japanese, and the character was supposed to be a personification of everything terrible that David has done. Though it's obvious he is utilizing the character artistically, David has made a character that he can push all of his wrongdoings onto. It wasn't David grooming and sexually abusing a minor, it was Itami, and so on. He has stated that his songs are somewhat autobiographical, and made about real situations that he's been in, meaning that the examples of him pushing responsibility away from himself and onto his agent of chaos character, the one who talks about how he wanted to kill someone for not wanting to date him and wanting to hurt the child he's grooming, is something that he has done himself. But he can alleviate some of the weight of those actions by simply saying it wasn't technically him doing it, it was the evil that lives inside of him. It's incredibly normal to not want to identify with some of the worst things that you've ever done. You want to view yourself as a good friend, a good relative, and a good person. So you try and forget about the times that you snapped at people, or deliberately fucked someone over. But to create an avatar to remove any responsibility from yourself is another idea entirely. If that is in fact what David is doing here, it shows that he doesn't actually take any responsibility for his negative actions, and therefore is not willing to change them. If you don't acknowledge your faults, you're not accepting them. You can't fix a problem that you don't think is there. One of the next videos he would release is for a song called Sleep Well, where he once again utilizes an actress who looks incredibly similar to Celeste. None of the song's lyrics are notable, although he once again writes about how he's not a great guy in their relationship, but that the real problem is her not liking when he isn't a great guy. Wow. One of the next songs he released is called Backstreet Girl, and in the lyrics he sings, quote, "Loving you too soon? No. But I don't want to wait too long for someone to love you before I do," unquote. which is a sentiment that we've heard from multiple pedophiles. This lyric is almost R. Kelly levels of cut and dry, as he directly states that he is interested in her because she's a minor, because she's a virgin, and that he isn't going to wait for her to be able to give consent, because that wouldn't be as fun. There are a number of other songs released in the meantime, many of them talking about running away, being in love with someone you can't have, or being altogether tortured by a romantic relationship. But on September 7th, 2023, Celeste's 13th birthday, David would post a new song to Discord, titled Birthday Suicide. The lyrics read as a goodbye letter to his family because he's going to kill himself, but the cover art that originally circulated was with him and a girl that is likely Celeste. In the photo, she's covering her face with a bag, but you can see her forehead, eyebrows, and hair, all of which resembles photos of her during that time. Releasing a song called Birthday Suicide on her birthday is disturbing for a lot of reasons, not least is the fact that he would be directly attempting to put his mental well-being onto her as a 13-year-old, despite the fact that he is the adult and a famous wealthy musician who she met on a fan Discord. He's telling her that if he were to ever hurt himself, it would be her fault, that any mistakes she makes could directly result in him ending his life. The sheer amount of pressure that would put on her is immense, but this is another tactic not uncommon for sexual predators. One of the reasons they target children is so they can have a sense of control over them. They don't want to be with an adult because they have the ability to think through conflicts and address problems and come to their own conclusions. Meanwhile, if you were to tell a child that if they step on a crack, they'll break their mother's back and so on, they're likely to take you at face value. So if and when the child begins to do something the predator doesn't like in this case, where she seemingly asked to go home to see her family, he can tell her that if she were to leave, even just for a day, he'll probably kill himself. His songs say as much. It's one of the only reoccurring themes. The same day, he premiered the anime music video for his song Rehab. The music video depicts his evil alter ego dismembering and killing another girl. Similarly, images of David and Celeste, taken around this time, would be posted to social media. Celeste, it would seem, would talk to her friends and peers about her relationship with David, which most people didn't seem too troubled by. Again, we're talking about children and teens who wouldn't necessarily be able to understand why their relationship would be wrong. At the same time, David would record a demo for a song titled Celeste, which has understandably been linked to her. The lyrics revolve around how David loves Celeste, how she gets him high without needing drugs, and he states that she, a 13-year-old, has gotten his name tattooed on her chest. There are conflicting reports about this tattoo, with some sites saying that she did in fact have his name on her and others denying the claim. However, she did have a matching tattoo on her right index finger, spelling out "shh" with 3 H's. While this tattoo is incredibly common, the fact that it matched David's has led many people to believe that this was a couple tattoo, which indicated the secret relationship between the pair. The song also has lyrics about being suicidal over their love, and how he is, quote, afraid she'll only love him when she's undressed, unquote, which indicates that he had sexually abused her at this point. It should also be noted that David did have another friend named Celeste, who wasn't a minor. There are conflicting reports about whether or not they were dating or had dated during the same time. Most of these reports are unverified, and when looking into the relationship between the two, we found that most of the statements were made by third parties who were simply speculating. At some point, David began streaming Fortnite on Twitch in his off time, and he would routinely show Celeste during these streams. In one clip that has been circulated, Celeste says, quote, "It's controversial that you rape kids," unquote. David then ends the stream after telling his mods to delete everything.
I media trained you.
No, you didn't.
That's controversial.
It's controversial of kids.
Really good.
Okay,
It's been a good one. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Mwah, 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 mwah. Oh my! Delete everything. Delete everything. Everything goes.
As mentioned earlier, Celeste would officially go missing on April 5th, 2024. Friends and family would also state that they had gotten messages from her and knew she was alive, although she was still legally missing. 4 months after going missing, she would be spotted backstage with David at one of his concerts. The vast majority of people were not aware that Celeste was a missing child, and therefore this video flew under the radar until her body was discovered. However, it would appear that some people within David's own Discord were aware of the situation and actively spoke about it. On August 16th, 2024, David would write that he was in a song crisis, meaning either he didn't know what song to release next or was experiencing writer's block. In response, someone would write, "Drop the one with the missing girl, Celeste Rivas Hernandez." This same user allegedly tried to warn people about David being a pedophile. However, their messages were of course ignored. He would write more songs about Celeste, including one called Hello Kitty Shirt, in reference to the fact that she loved Hello Kitty, and was reportedly wearing sandals with a character on it when she went missing. In February of 2025, he would put out the song One More Dance, and in the music video, he would once again cast someone who looked similar to Celeste. The video depicts his alter ego killing him, then putting them in the trunk of his car. This seems to be in reference to him having to kill off the side of himself that knows being in a relationship with a child is wrong. Celeste's body was discovered the day after her birthday, September 8th, 2025. She would have been 15 years old, but instead she'd been killed, savagely dismembered, and left to decompose in the trunk of David's Tesla. Something that has been made abundantly clear throughout David's music and social media presence is his own affinity for the macabre. We can see this through the symbolism he uses in his music, and how he has spoken about the avatar that he uses in his music videos as being sort of a Jekyll and Hyde character. He wants to be good, he wants to be a loving and supportive person, but his shadow self won't let him. When he feels angry or hurt, he simply can't control what happens next, meaning that the hurt he inflicts upon others simply isn't his fault, and therefore isn't his responsibility. We often see this kind of behavior in abusers, where they will blame their violence on the fact that they were stressed or under the influence. It wasn't really them that lashed out at their victim, it was something negative inside of them. Therefore, they don't need to seek therapy or professional help for what they did. This usually gets turned around on the victim over time, with the abuser convincing them that, had they not been so demanding, then they wouldn't have had to put their hands on them, which is never really the case. For example, one of his earliest songs is titled Runaway. He says in the lyrics, quote, "I got issues, but you wouldn't know. So many times I've tried to show 'em. What's the issue? What's up with you lately? Said you don't want me, but you're the one I need and you run away." End quote. While one could easily argue that this is just a song and it doesn't matter, the contents of the song showcase a lack of personal responsibility on his part. He agrees that he is the one who has issues, though he remains vague as to what those issues are. He has a problem, but immediately shifts the responsibility for the problem onto the other person. The person he is describing doesn't want to deal with his issues, likely because they are hurting her as well. They keep running away from him, which he classifies as the real problem in the relationship. They don't want to put up with his issues, so they're actually the real antagonist here, not the nondescript issues that he has. David depicted this in almost all of his songs and music videos, which will likely be excused as being works of fiction, but he also displayed this kind of thinking in posts on social media. In his public posts on TikTok, David supports the idea of a very parasitic, possessive love, one in which violence is an acceptable response to negative feelings of jealousy or anger. Though at the time of writing, he has scrubbed his reposts of such content. He validated the idea of becoming incensed, violent, and homicidal over the idea of his partner having been with anyone else, as if that was normal, which of course it isn't. It's normal to feel uncomfortable and jealous over a partner's past relationships, especially if those relationships resulted in that person being hurt. You love them, you want them to be safe, and you know that the person harmed them physically or emotionally. But any reasonable adult should be able to work through those feelings and understand that you cannot punish your boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse for having lived a life before you. Granted, it once again should be pointed out that David likely began talking to Celeste when she was 11 years old, meaning that if she did have a previous romantic relationship, it was either with another child, so it was basically harmless, or she'd been preyed upon by another adult. But given that he even considered having a sexual relationship with a minor acceptable in the first place, it would make sense that he would then excuse physically abusing said child in order to make himself feel better about the potential sexual abuse she had undergone before him. Based on the content that he's put out, it's evident to us that this is a person who feels no sense of shame in their own depravity, because he believes it adds a certain sense of artistic flair to his work. In his mind, his extreme reactions, his anger and abusive and potentially homicidal urges are just the price that he has to pay for artistic merit, and so he doesn't need to change anything. It's obvious at the very least that he did have an inappropriate sexual relationship with this child, and he purposely kept her from her family, and we believe based solely on the information provided in this video, and he's likely responsible for her death. But at the time of recording, he has not been named a suspect, and is not under any official investigation. While most people have found that fact frustrating, and feel as if the police are not properly doing their job, their methodology does make sense. They need to create the most robust case possible for making an arrest or bringing a suspect in for questioning. They're fact-checking every story that has been posted on social media. They're gathering evidence, validating that evidence, and thoughtfully retracing Celeste's last known steps. A person of interest, a suspect, or an arrest will likely not be made public until they feel as if they have a solid case against that person. And given that David is a famous, wealthy musician, their goal would be to make sure he feels as if he isn't being looked at as a suspect by them, so he doesn't flee the country. Celeste was 14 years old when she was killed. She was a little girl who had a full life ahead of her, and did not deserve what was done to her. With all of that said, let us know what you think about this case in the comments down below. As always, if there's a case you would like to bring more attention to, or a story you would like to see on the channel, let me know by leaving me a comment or sending me an email at dreading.official@gmail.com. Remember, stay safe.